Good morning and welcome to this hybrid meeting of the Environment, Regeneration and Streetscene Scrutiny Committee on the 6th of October 2022. And Councillor Sean Percy, I'll be chairing today's meeting. You may hear that I've got a bit of a cold, so please bear with me, but I'm sure we'll get through the meeting just fine. Please ensure that your phones are switched to silent during the meeting and that your microphones are muted when you're not speaking. In addition, please raise your hand or electronic hand if you're joining us remotely if you wish to speak. Before we move on to the agenda this morning, I'd just like to note apologies from Councillor Tim Bowen, Councillor Sheila Penry and Councillor Laura Williams. Okay, so I'm going to move on to agenda item 2, which is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest?
I see no hands raised in the chamber, Chair, and I see none raised via Teams either.
Thank you, Chloe. If at any point during the meeting members feel they need to raise a declaration of interest, please just raise your hand and let us know. So I'm going to move on to agenda item 3, which is minutes of the previous meeting. Can I have a proposal and a seconder, please, that the committee agree that the minutes are an accurate record? Anyone want to move?
I propose.
Thank
I'll
you,
second,
Ros. And Nathan second. Thanks both. If anyone has any objections to that, please raise your hands now and let me know. No, that's all good. Lovely. Thank you very much. So we're going to move on now to the Cabinet agenda for pre-decision scrutiny. The Scrutiny Committee members have agreed to scrutinise items 7, 8, 9, 10 and 20 on the Cabinet agenda. So we'll move on to item 7 of the Cabinet agenda, which is cemetery rules and regulations. Officers, do you have anything to add to the report before I go to questions from members?
Nothing further to add, Chair.
Thank you. So I will go on to questions, which is first question from Councillor Stephanie Lynch. Stephanie?
Hi, thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, with the provision that memorial benches are being halted at the moment because of space and that kind of thing, is this something that we would be able to review in the near future? Because I know memorial benches are important in terms of, grieving and remembering the person that was there. Is this something that we can look at in the future? Because I know, in particular, there's some space in the bigger crems, and it is something important to families.
Thank you, Stephanie. I've had a similar question as well from Ros and Davis. Ros, did you want to add anything to that before the officer comes back?
Well, I'm referring to page 20 on the report regarding memorial seats. It states that memorial seats have already been placed in cemeteries. Well, I'm not aware that any memorial seat has been placed in Godricraig Cemetery, and I haven't received any information from any officer regarding the matter.
Okay, thanks, Ros. James, did you want to come back on those questions?
Yes, of course, Chair. If I come back to Councillor Lynch's quick query first, the current situation is that, and it has been now for some years, that we've sort of put a hold on requests for memorial benches within the cemeteries, purely because of the space take-up, the land take-up. What we're proposing here with this report is to actually reinstate that within the policy, that we do put memorial benches within the cemeteries, but we actually do it on a sort of communal basis, where one communal bench could have 10 plaques. So just giving you an example, we've got over 30 requests on a waiting list down in Margam Cemetery. Now, if we wanted to put 30 individual benches in, it would be a bit overkill, and there'd be too many benches in the cemetery, and it would take up too much grave provision space. So what we are anticipating doing is to put these communal benches in place, so we can take up to 10 per bench, which would give us something we can actually manage and identify enough space which isn't suitable for burials. And then if I come back to Councillor Davis's query on obviously Godricraig Cemetery, what we've done, Councillor Davis, is we haven't gone in and actually just put place benches in. We've only just dealt with requests, but that's something we can certainly do up at Godragaig, and I do apologise if there has been requests and there hasn't been put in place recently. It's because it has been put on stop because of obviously the issues we were dealing with in terms of demand and what the resource we've got to meet that. But it's something we can certainly look at on a basis up in Godragaig.
Well, the thing is, it's stated here that benches have already been placed in cemeteries, and that is not the case, and I wasn't aware of it. So would you have to have a request before a bench could be placed in the cemetery?
I believe that's the way it's worked, yes, up until now.
Right.
We've dealt with requests and then met them where we could. What's happened is that it's got out of hand, I suppose, to a certain extent in some cemeteries, and it's not just cemeteries, but we've got a similar thing in country parks, for example, and a memorial garden. So what we are saying is we can have that provision, but we like to do it on a communal basis where if there's 10 requests, we only deal with one bench.
Okay, thanks.
Right, so I think it would be a good idea then if I not actually meet with you or speak to you, James, regarding some issues in the cemetery itself. Okay.
Yes, okay, good.
If you can contact me, thank you. Diolch yn fawr.
Thanks, Ros. Councillor Lynch, did you want to come back on the answer from the officer?
Yeah, thank you. It's just a question for clarification. Will it be obvious to families that have applied for this that it won't be their individual name? They'll be sharing it with other names.
Happy for me to come back, Chair? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's fine.
Councillor Lynch, yeah, it will be. What we'll do is we start putting some messages out there as well, and we'll put a bit of a communication strategy in place just to let people know what these requests tend to be just sort of one-off requests we get from family members, and like I said, unfortunately, we've been in a situation, especially over the last couple of years, where we haven't been able to meet those requests because there's so many of them. But we feel that going through the communal bench route, we can meet that request, but also make sure we've got the resource to be able to do it as well.
Okay, thank you very much, James, for the answers there. So if there are no further questions, can I draw my members' attention to the recommendations on pages 23 and 24 of the Cabinet Agenda pack? Can I have a proposer and a seconder for those recommendations, please?
I propose, Chair.
Rosalind Davis, and a seconder, please.
I'll second.
Was that you, Steph?
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Lynch. It's quite hard for me to see the chamber from here. If members not indicate to the contrary, then I'll take it that this decision is supported to Cabinet.
I see no hands raised, Chair, so that's been approved to go to Cabinet Board.
Thank you, Chloe. So I'm going to move on now to item 8, the street naming and numbering policy and fees. So officers, did you want to add anything additional to the report that's presented today?
Nothing further to add, Chair.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks, thanks, Joy. So there's a couple of questions on this one. I think Ros was down as the first speaker. Ros?
I haven't got a problem with the policy, but I think we need to make sure that street names are correctly spelt, and especially in Welsh, because we have had some howlers in the past regarding translation. I won't state what they are here, but they were quite funny. So
Okay.
Can we double check that the translations are correct, especially in Welsh?
Thanks, Ros. I think, yeah, it's a very important issue, and obviously if we can get some reassurance on the process, that'd be brilliant. I've got a couple of other questions as well. So Councillor Wayne Carpenter.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As a local member of Neath East, we are aware of the new housing estate and the choice of naming, and all communication has been in English, the English translation being Chestnut Close. now before council. It's not a major issue, but it would be nice to have both the Welsh and the English as part of our report today.
Okay.
Thanks, Wayne.
Thank
I think just I suppose to add to that, we had a little bit of a chat in pre-briefing on this issue, and I think it was around just a bit of clarity on the communication to members, really, on those issues. If there's going to be translations, that they are appropriately communicated and members are sort of made aware and given an opportunity to sort of feed in on those. I've got a question on this item as well myself, which was in relation to consultation, really. I note that there's no requirement for consultation on this item, but obviously, Joy, you'll know we've had a brief chat about this issue in the past, and there's some, potentially contentious or sensitive things in terms of street naming, particularly around naming streets after deceased persons, fallen soldiers, etc. I guess I just wanted to flag up, really, and certainly from my perspective as a member that's received those queries, and I'm sure other members have done in the past, that if there is an opportunity to do some external consultation on this policy, whether that's a review period or something like that. I understand we don't really have anything much of a policy at the moment, so there's an immediate need to have something written down. But from my perspective, I think it would be really important if we do try and bake in an opportunity to do some consultation so those voices can be heard on those issues. So that'd be my point there. So I don't know if you want to come back on some of those, Joy. Thank you.
No, it was a valid point, and I apologise for the lack of Welsh translation in that, councillor. In terms of Councillor Davis's comments, I would agree. There have been issues in the past, although I think we've got a bit of a belt and braces now. Everything is run through the sort of Welsh translation unit that we use in Swansea. I've also got 3 Welsh speakers within the road safety team, and we have had discussions around there. But if Councillor Davis and a number of other officers, we will flag these with people. So if there are concerns, we'll know of them before they actually get put out. I think that's very important. The last thing we want is to put out, as Councillor Davis said, some howlers. And finally, Councillor Percy, in relation to your policy and the consultation period, if you would like us to go out to consultation on this policy, we're able to. In relation, yes, you're right. The only one actually that I've ever been involved in is the one that you and I discussed. And I think when as officers we were looking to put that line in about no naming after, it was in some ways looking to support councillors so that you weren't caught in the position poor Councillor Percy was at the time. But we're happy to revert that and say that we'll consult if you prefer that at that time anyway. It's whatever you would prefer, really.
Thank you for that, Joy. Did any members want to come back, Ros?
Yeah, I'm not being disrespectful to any Welsh speakers, but being able to speak Welsh just as in English does not mean that you can spell properly.
I agree. Thank you.
And if you are sending anything to Swansea regarding translation, I hope that they reply, not leave a message, so that you put the same sign as Swansea City did some years ago in Welsh. I'm sorry, I'm not in the office at present.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ros. Did any other members want to come back on those points? Councillor Carpenter, are you okay with the response?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Thanks. And in terms of the consultation point, Joy, I think, if you're able to do that at some stage, like I said, I don't think it needs to be done immediately, but if there's an opportunity to put this out there and get some of that feedback, I think it would really help.
Okay.
And if that could be done, I'm sure committee members would appreciate, a report back with that consultation response.
That's fine. And that's just for me to be clear, it's the whole policy we're consulting on.
I think so. I think that would be this is my view, obviously, as one local member, rather than necessarily the view of the whole committee at this stage. But if officers are happy to take that back just on that basis, then then that's brilliant.
Okay. Can do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So the recommendations, members, are listed on page 70 of the Cabinet Agenda Pack. Could I please have a proposer and seconder for those recommendations?
I propose, Chair.
I second, Chair.
And Councillor Wyn Carpenter. Thank you. If members don't indicate to the contrary, then I will take it that this decision is supported to Cabinet.
I can see no hands raised in the chamber chair or via Teams, so it's been approved to Cabinet Board.
Yeah, thank you, Chloe. Okay, so I'll move on now to item 9, which is subsidised bus services contract extensions. Officers, would you like to add anything additional to the report? I think Brendan's here. Brendan?
No, nothing further to add, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So I'll go to questions. So the first question was from Councillor Nathan Goldip-John. Nathan?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to say I support the recommendation in the report. However, I do have some concerns with the wider bus network, and that kind of feeds into this report. The report implies there will be a shortfall in funding in the future, and if I've understood it correctly, the council will either have to cut services or reallocate funding in the not too distant future. I acknowledge the local authorities' funding is being squeezed and looks to continue to be squeezed. However, if we want to see a modal shift, pardon me, towards more sustainable and active modes of transport within the borough, we need to make these modes more affordable and more accessible. If the Welsh Government's plans aren't at a stage which would sufficiently address the concerns of efficiency, accessibility, affordability, we as a local authority need to step up and address these issues. Therefore, I'd like a position statement or indication from the Council regarding the Welsh Government's recent publication titled One Network, One Timetable, One Ticket, Planning for Buses as a Public Service for Wales. And the reason behind this is actually quite simple. I believe that we should know how to plan for the future, especially if they require subsidies. That's it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got a couple of other questions, which I'll bring in before the officer can come back. So, Sharon?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, similar to Nathan, really. I'm happy to support the recommendation, but on the last paragraph of the executive summary, I just wondered if we could have some more clarity, because obviously the prices exceed last year's. So is it significant? How much are we looking at? I understand what you're saying about the budget. However, we're extending till March 23. We need to be getting prepared. So roughly, you know, how much money are we actually looking at? You may have already know some of the figures, this committee, because you will have known the figures from previous years. This is new, this committee is new to me, so I was just wondering if you could provide some clarity around the actual figures. I'm not expecting exact figures, but ballpark figures, please.
Thank you, Councillor Freegard. I've also got a question from Rosalind Davis. Ros?
I think we need to find a way of promoting the use, especially of the subsidised buses, so that more people would be using the buses and that the service would become far more viable. I'm wondering if we could look at that to see what could be done, please.
Okay, thank you, Ros. So just to summarise, I suppose Nathan's point is around kind of where are we on the Welsh Government white paper? Have we got any indication of progress against that, and what are our options, and what are we looking to do in relation to the white paper? Sharon Freegard's asking around the costs, and then Ros around promotion. Depending on what you come back with, Brendan, I may have something to add myself, but I'll leave you come back for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, well, I agree. With regards to the white paper, the One Network, One Timetable, One Ticket, this was published back in March, and the responses to the consultation are currently being reviewed by Welsh Government, so the details of the outcomes haven't yet been published. But I agree, I think improvements can be made to the way bus services are currently operated in Wales. There are some concerns about how the changes are going to be made in practice. and whether the level of funding required to achieve this goal is available to address the challenges of climate change and transport poverty. So we are trying to tackle the immediate issue of extending the contracts and trying to source revenue funding ourselves within the council to maintain the service from April onwards, whilst we wait for Welsh Government decisions with regards to bus funding. With regards to the second question, the increase is as a direct result really of lack of patronage. Obviously, during COVID, the direction was that no one was to travel, and obviously that decimated the local bus industry. Well, we are seeing a slow recovery, not as quickly as people expected this to be, with basically patronage returning within Neath Talbot to sort of 50% of where we used to be. So basically, the subsidised routes then are being at tender prices are coming back significantly higher in order to compensate for the loss of revenue from the reduction in patronage. Does that answer the questions, Chair?
Thank you, Brendan. I'll just Councillor Freegan wants to come back.
Yeah, no, I was looking at for actually some comparable figures, really, Brendan, because we know what we had, so we can clearly say what the shortfall is. And I just wondered if you could share that with us. And clearly, in terms of the contract, that would need to be monitored, because that would be dynamic, that would be changing year on year. So what is the shortfall?
Brendan, are you able to come back and address that query?
Sorry, Councillor. Yeah, the shortfall, basically the contracts have nearly doubled in price.
What is
from the quotation?
Is that, Brendan?
So that would be approximately 360,000.
Right.
Yeah,
So it was half that then. It was half that cost, was it?
That's correct. Yes, yes.
That seems rather a lot to me. Okay.
Like, yeah, as I said, the patronage figures have dramatically reduced, you see, by half. So therefore, the request then for subsidies would basically double, I'd imagine.
Chair, could I just ask one more question? So when we renew the contract in March 23, for what period is that contract going to be?
Councillor, we normally go out for tender for a period of 5 years.
Gosh, that seems a bit bizarre with the changes and them not knowing how patronage is going to increase, and there's all sorts of issues in there. Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor.
Chair.
Yeah.
Councillor Nathan Goldip-John would like to come back, if that's okay.
Absolutely fine. I was just going to check if you wanted to. So, Councillor Goldip-John.
Thank you, Brendan, for those responses. They are really helpful. I think it's just adding on Councillor Freeguard's points and the white paper, because obviously if you're going to tender for 5 years, does that mean then we're not anticipating any actions from that white paper for 5 years? In which case, then I'm sure the council could look more holistically at producing and providing a much better public service in the form of buses than what is currently proposed, or what might be proposed based on what we've done already. So if you could clarify that, I would really appreciate it.
Thank you. Brendan, are you able to come back?
I think from a tendering point of view, we have to give the operators some sort of security. One of the main issues we've had previously is that funding from Welsh Government have only been on an annual basis, which doesn't give the operators much security and opportunities for investing long term in vehicles, etc. So when we offer contracts for a longer term, it gives the operators some sort of security and confidence in the way things are going forward. But I agree, there is a lot of unknowns out there at the moment with regards to the white paper, and not having any details of the outcomes of the consultation obviously adds to the concerns around the table today.
Okay, thank you, Brendan. Nathan, did you want to come back?
Yes, please, if that's okay. Brendan, would it be possible for us to potentially write a letter to Welsh Government stressing these concerns we have then, and to maybe provide us with some certainty so that we can provide, in turn, the residents of Neath Talbot certainty and potentially provide them more efficient and affordable bus transport in the future?
Yes, of course, Councillor. I could work with our cabinet member on a letter.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. I think to perhaps kind of summarise some of the concerns and maybe adding some of my own comments there. I think that this is the challenge here, isn't it? Is around the uncertainty, and I think this report is only a stopgap measure, isn't it? And at the end of the period that this report covers, it is a huge unknown. And I think even if we don't get much of an indication from Welsh Government around the white paper timescales, so I think the contents of any letter should probably stress the need to understand the indicative timescales of the implementation of the white paper. I think that's key, really, isn't it, for proper strategic decision making. But even if we don't get that, I think an idea of what the transition or interim funding arrangements are going to be is going to be really helpful, because I think the report acknowledges, doesn't it, that the current bus services support grant is due to finish, and we don't currently have an indication of what the next grant is going to look like. And I'm sure all members here don't want to be in a position where either the services kind of drop off a cliff, or that we have to try and find this shortfall in our revenue budget, perhaps at the expense of something else. And then perhaps Welsh Government may turn up last minute and give us the funding. So I think in terms of, if you're willing to sort of draft a letter with the cabinet members, I think that would be very helpful. And obviously, if you could share that response with the committee, if you could cover those issues, I think that would be, it would give us a little bit of an idea of how we can proceed with this as well from a scrutiny point of view. Because I'm sure, depending on the response, individual members and the cabinet can place further pressure on Welsh Government also. Councillor Freegard, did you want to come in briefly?
Yes, please, just briefly. Obviously, we're going to be revisiting this because I do have a concern that we're going to sign up for a 5-year contract when the price is doubled, and the profits could be that we don't know the margins there, and we're signing up for 5 years when Welsh Government are giving an annual grant, and so there's huge implications for the budget there. So I just wanted to raise that. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I will ask just a brief question to Brendan, which I anticipate I know the answer to, but in terms of, if we did those 5-year contracts, I suppose that doesn't really preclude this kind of wide-ranging change in the white paper, does it? Because I'm assuming if that does come in, then all these contracts are going to have to be reviewed and re-looked at across Wales anyway. So I suppose it doesn't necessarily lock us out of any wide-ranging change there, does it?
No, exactly, Chair. We've got termination clauses within our contracts, and we can amend them, etc., etc. That's so the actual term isn't an issue really. The term is to give them, the operators, some security.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. And just for clarity, really, I'm assuming all members are supportive of Brendan and the cabinet member drafting this letter to relay some of our concerns. I can't see anyone sort of shaking their heads there. Yeah.
Councillor Goldup-John would like to come back in.
Absolutely, no problem. Nathan?
Thank you, Chair. I think, totally agree with the letter going to Welsh Government. I just think we need to emphasise that time frame element, because we can't just sit back and not act on what we actually need to do. So whilst I appreciate the 5 years is to provide them certainty, we don't know when they're going to come in with the white paper, and I think that needs to be emphasised in whatever letter that we send to Welsh Government. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's an important point, and I suppose that perhaps, Brendan, if once something's drafted, if that could be circulated to the committee, perhaps for some brief feedback before it goes, that might be helpful as well. I'm sure members would appreciate that, just to give it a quick, make sure that all their concerns have been addressed. Wonderful. Thank you very much, members and Brendan for the really good discussion there. So I'll just go to the recommendation, which is listed on page 94 of the Cabinet Agenda Pack. Can I please have a proposer and a seconder, please?
I'll propose, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Golub-John, and a seconder.
I'll second, Chair.
Councillor Stephanie Lynch. Okay, if members don't indicate to the contrary, then I will take it that this decision is supported to Cabinet.
I can't see any hands raised in the chamber or via Teams, Chair, so that recommendation will go to Cabinet Board for approval.
Excellent, thank you. So I will move on now to item number 10, which is the Getley Tunnel report. Officers, would you like to add anything additional to the report before we go to questions from members?
Nothing further to add, Chair.
Thank you, James. Obviously, just to draw members' attention that there are a number of options outlined in the report today. Officers are recommending option 2 of those options. So my first indication is Councillor Golub-John. Nathan.
Yeah, me again, Chair. So the purpose of the report, as stated, is to consider the condition of the disused railway tunnel and its priority for capital investment. I believe the first part of that sentence has been sufficiently addressed in the report, however, not the latter. I would like to understand how the scheme aligns with the Council's capital investment programme. Option 2 appears to be the right course of action for the time being. However, the report doesn't actually identify how the Council will safeguard and then subsequently promote the asset long term, or where that would fall in the pipeline of work for capital investment. The impact assessment identifies that the tunnel is a significant historical asset for the local authority. However, it does note in 2 sections, in the impact assessment, long-term and integration, that the potential future investment could offer a heritage feature for the local community and visitors. The Avon Valley and the integration section offers similar words. However, it doesn't actually provide any detail, or it doesn't appear to be given much thought of what opportunity that would offer. So I would actually like to propose that the team return to this committee within the next 12 months with some sort of options appraisal which explores potential capital investment opportunities that would reflect the stance in the impact assessment. It could be quite high level, but I think it's important that we actually identify these opportunities where we can and do the work. So if some funding, like levelling up funding, comes back our way, we have schemes ready to go. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. James, did you want to come back on that question?
Yes, please, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Golub-John. Yeah, I agree with it to an extent. I think the thought behind the report is that, I know, as it said out in the report, it was brought to our attention that this is now a council asset because we own the land under which it sits. And it came from a filming request, which is why then the land is actually vested with Streetcare Services, which we requested a report be brought forward after an inspection was done to identify the issues associated with the asset. You know, it's not the active travel network. And obviously it's not on the adopted network either. So in terms of the wider sort of capital investment program, I suppose the answer to you at the moment is it's not on there. Obviously there's a lot more pressing matters. You know, like in the same valley up in Cymru, where you've got the adopted network, which requires some big schemes. The reason we've gone for that option and the recommendation is to keep it sort of as it is at the moment, so closed up, but obviously the assets still remaining, and to enable us to continue to undertake regular inspections is for any future capital investment that might become available. Now, obviously, what I'm talking about there, and you sort of touched on it as well, I suppose, whether it was LF funding or HRF funding, whatever it is, any sort of grant funding that is available. And the council could certainly bring a report back within 12 months as suggested. I suppose the thing for this would be it would likely sit in terms of the prioritisation and any strategy for this asset going forward would sit with the new head of leisure, tourism, heritage and culture. So that's something I think we could discuss with that person once they can post. And whether it's a report from them or maybe a joint report that comes back at a future date, looking at the options that are available. I suppose we've done a mini options appraisal within this report in terms of where we are now. That could change, I agree with you, if funding streams did become available. But in terms of the capital investment programme at the moment, it isn't on it purely because it in terms of prioritisation, it isn't where a lot of the others are at the moment.
Okay, thank you, James. Nathan, did you want to come back? I expect you would.
Yeah, no, that's totally understood, and I get that, and thank you for answering my question so clearly. And yeah, I think when the new head of the leisure, culture and tourism director is appointed, I think that's something that they should definitely look at. But just going back to my point about maybe within the next 12 months having some sort of potential options, I think that would be really helpful for this committee and wider council just to look at if that's possible.
Thanks, Nathan. I think perhaps just to kind of clarify and emphasize that point, because this was definitely something I picked up in the report as well, is kind of, well, what happens now? And I acknowledge, sort of, James, you mentioned this kind of is a mini options appraisal, but I suppose where we're coming from is in relation to that option one, which is basically kind of do some repair work or making good work to the tunnel. Within that, there's going to be a plethora of options on how to proceed. And I think in terms of perhaps what Nathan's getting at, and I'm sure he could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think to have some options around doing that, bringing the tunnel back into some sort of use, or at least making it accessible as a feature, some interpretation, whatever that is, that there's obviously numerous things that could be explored. And I think if something could be brought back, even if it was high level on that side of things, we'd at least be a little bit further down the line. And again, I appreciate your comments around the new sort of post that's coming in. I guess there's not yet clarity on how assets like this fit into that and the responsibility of them, because you'll know this is one of many kind of assets that are redundant from their original use, but are providing a significant benefit from a heritage point of view. And yeah, even in the same valley, there's many a disused bridge and structure, isn't there? I think the council generally needs a bit of clarity as to who's going to own those in terms of projects and maintenance. But if Nathan, in terms of what I've just said, in terms of clarifying what your sort of options appraisal or whatever you were asking for is, does that kind of make sense? Have I kind of covered that?
Yeah, absolutely spot on. That's dead right. I appreciate there's already been, like you said, Sean, those 4 options presented to us, but then moving forward, what would that imply? What are we going to do with a fully renovated tunnel? It's just a tunnel at the moment, and if it was option 1, it's still just going to be a tunnel. It's not going to be an active travel route, or it's not going to be some sort of leisure opportunity. And yeah, you very eloquently explained my thoughts, so thank you for that.
Okay, so James, I suppose you've got a bit of clarity there, I suppose, where we're coming from. Obviously, there's been kind of a proposal put forward by Councillor Goldup-John in terms of bringing forward a report. I'm not sure. I'll just take Mike's advice really on this. Should this be an amendment to the recommendation, Mike, on this item?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I think this can sit as the proposal made by Councillor Nathan Goldup-John. If we can have the wording, or if you can be provided with the wording, then that can go ahead as suggested.
Okay, thank you. James, did you want to come in before we go down this route?
Yeah, of course. I think so. Just for clarity on that, I think what you're probably talking about is a feasibility for the future of the asset, a feasibility study, and like you said, at a higher level in terms of, an inspection and an appraisal has been done in terms of what's required to bring it back to, I suppose, its former glory in terms of it's safe. But then, what are we going to do with it? Is it going to form part of an active travel network and those sorts of things? That's fine. And like you said, I do feel that the strategic level would sit with the new head of service post. But obviously, it's an asset that's vested with Streetcare, so it would be something we would work together on. So yeah, that's no problem at all. We can look at that. Yeah, I don't think there's anything further to add to that, Chair. I think that's fine.
Okay, thank you. So I'll go back to you now, Nathan, just perhaps for some specific wording of your proposal that we can just take a quick vote on.
Yeah, I'll just probably follow James's wording then. So to to come back to this committee within 12 months with a feasibility study for the future of the asset at a very high level. Is that acceptable? Not very high level, at a high level.
Yeah, James, I think that reflects what you said. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I think no, a suggestion we've looked at is potentially no, I don't know if you want to look at the report on funding options or on a feasibility report be presented in 12 months' time, and I suppose the matter would then, realistically be referred to accordingly to the head of leisure, tourism, heritage and culture once appointed. So maybe a combination, I suppose, of that wording and what Councillor Goldham John has suggested. But it's basically a feasibility study of the asset. To understand where we're going to put a strategy together for where it's going to go going forward if funding became available. I think that's the important part as well.
Yeah. Okay, Nathan, did you want to revise your wording based on James's input there? Just so we can have something we can we can take a vote on.
Did you write that down? No.
Mr. Chair, I wonder, would it assist if James were prepared to do a brief wording that might be then put to the scrutiny committee, and if that's in agreement, that can form the proposal? Would that be acceptable, I wonder?
That'd be acceptable to me. Is that okay for you, Nathan?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine with me.
There we are. Appreciate your help there, Mike, navigating these things. Okay, James, I suppose when you're ready.
Yeah, okay. Bear with me.
Just to clarify as well, this will be just added on to the recommendation that's already contained within the report. So if we take that as like the stance, so that will be up to the point where it says to each end of the tunnel being maintained as existing, and then we could put on the end then the point about the feasibility study being undertaken. So if that, I don't know if that helps James to just maybe just come up with like a short sentence to add on to the end of what's already there.
Yeah, I think we could make it really brief then. So if we just say that a feasibility study be brought forward within the next 12 months, looking at the options for reopening the asset in the future.
Right.
Okay.
So I'll type something in the chat now. Let me.
Yeah, thank you.
So I'm making a new sentence, and it starts with that a feasibility study be carried out. James, do you want to help out with the?
Yeah, and the subsequent options brought forward within the next 12 months.
Options
brought back to the committee, was it?
Brought
Yes.
to the committee. Right, bear with me. Okay, right. So we've got the recommendation that's already contained in the report. So this will be the sentence that adds on to the recommendation, if you all agree with this. So that a feasibility study be carried out and the subsequent options be brought to the committee within the next 12 months. How is that? Is that okay?
Sounds perfect, thank you. Sorry for being such a pain.
No, well, look, this is what we're here for. This is exactly what we're here to do. So, no, I really appreciate that. So, Nathan, I'm assuming you want to propose that?
Do you want me to pop the wording into the chat?
Yes,
so
please,
it's the
just so everyone
ending.
can see it. Yeah.
So I've just popped the additional part into the chat. So I'm happy to read it out, Chair, if you want, and then Councillor Goldham John, if he wants to propose that, he can just says to propose, and
That's
then we
fine.
just have a seconder.
Go ahead.
Let me just. Okay, so the recommendation, having had due regard to the first stage integrated impact assessment, it is recommended that option 2 be pursued for the foreseeable future, with palisade fencing to each end of the tunnel being maintained as existing, and that a feasibility study be carried out and the subsequent options be brought to the committee within the next 12 months.
Yeah. So, do we have a proposer for that?
I just amend that last sentence. A feasibility study for future use be carried out and the subsequent options be brought forward to the committee within the next 12 months. Is that okay?
Yeah, I think that's clearer.
Feasibility study for future use.
So we're just adding future use
Yes, please.
into that, no problem. So if you want to, do you want me to read it out again, Chair, for clarity?
Yeah, just.
Or are you happy?
But Mike's nodding, so I think you should read
yeah,
it out.
okay.
I'll defer to Mike.
So having had due regard to the first stage integrated impact assessment, it is recommended that option 2 be pursued for the foreseeable future, with palisade fencing to each end of the tunnel being maintained as existing, and that a feasibility study for future use be carried out and the subsequent options be brought to the committee within the next 12 months.
Wonderful. Okay, do I have a proposal for that?
Chair, I see Councillor Freeguard's hand is raised.
Councillor Freegard, Sharon?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd say rather than for future use, because we don't know what's going to be in the feasibility study, perhaps for consideration by the committee.
I think that's more vague then, though, isn't it? I think it needs to be specific enough to direct what we're looking to see as feasible, because I think the certainly the indication I've had from the discussion is that members would like the asset to have a use or a value. I don't know, that's my reading of this.
I was just thinking where we were in the costings, we don't know any of those background.
But I suppose that's what the study would look into, isn't it? I suppose.
Yeah, Chair, I think future use, that could be anything, couldn't it?
Yeah.
So I think it's vague enough, but it's specific enough at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's what we are. Are you okay with that, Councillor Freegard? Okay, right. Nathan, are you happy to propose that?
Happy to propose, Chair.
Thank you. And a seconder?
I'll second.
Was that Councillor Dacey?
Councillor Dacey just
Hello,
seconded.
Councillor Dacey. It's the first time I've seen you, actually. Okay, if there are no indications to the contrary, then we will. I will assume this recommendation is carried to the Cabinet Board for consideration.
I can see no hands raised in the chamber. I can see no hands raised via Teams. So that addition to the recommendation has been approved to go to Cabinet Board. And just to let you know, Chair, I've popped the new wording into the chat for clarity as well.
Thank you. Mike, do we need to now vote on the substantive recommendation, or has that covered it?
That's covered, sir.
Excellent, thank you. Wonderful. Thanks, members, for that. Again, good discussion and a good positive outcome for the Scrutiny Committee. Right, so just going back now to our papers, I'm just going to skim through. Right, so this is all the public decisions we've chosen to scrutinise at today's meeting. And returning to the scrutiny agenda briefly, there are no urgent items on the scrutiny agenda. We now need to move into private session to consider item 20. So agenda item 6 of the scrutiny agenda, to resolve to exclude the public for the following items pursuant to section 100A part 4 and 5 of the Local Government Act 1972 and the relevant exempt paragraphs of part 4 of schedule 12A to the above act. Can I have a proposer and a seconder to move into private, please? Proposer?
Propose, Chair.
Thank you, Nathan. And a seconder?
I second, Chair.
Thank you. I was Councillor Carpenter. Okay, can I please ask that any public or press now exit the meeting?